Your knowledge of contract language is imperative.
You must know what a violation looks like if you wish to be active in its cessation.
It is important to understand that being active and knowledgeable affects your overall bargaining strength.
Together, we can forge a more militant NALC.
Good morning and welcome back to Parcels of Knowledge, that podcast dedicated to delivering knowledge to the city letter carrier with your host, the Roseville Wrecking Ball, at grievance number 511 here in the sunshine city of Roseville, Michigan, where everything is roses. Get out those cleats, though, because we had a bit of snow a few days ago, so be safe out there, fellas. Before we get into the meat of our knowledge today, I have a few announcements. First, I want to once again formally acknowledge that I will be having Corey Walton on the podcast for his run for EVP at the national level. Anyone and everyone who wants to ask him a question, he will answer all questions. So please send them to rosevillewreckingball@yahoo.com. I will have that email in the episode's description. Please listen to instructions. Send them to that email. That's the most accurate way for you to get your question submitted, because if you send it to me via alternative methods, it may not be, I might not catch up on it, because I move all those emails to an important folder set aside for this occasion. So if you're giving it to me via Reddit or via Facebook, I'm just going to have to email myself, and if I don't get a chance to do so, your question might not be incorporated. So please send them to that email. Second, I want to call upon those who are in the APWU who have asked me if there's an APWU equivalent to my podcast. I have found one. Yeah, I can't find the guys who messaged me before. I tried to find you guys' number again. I can't find it. I got too many people calling me, but I found a guy out of my area, in fact, who has started a podcast because he thought mine was pretty cool. His name is Eric Charnaby. He was running for business agent, and his podcast is honestly, it's fantastic. You know, he started it in October, so I'm a little bit late for telling you about this. I found out about it 2 days ago. But it's called APWU. That's YOU with Eric Charnaby. So APWYOU with Eric Charnaby. I think that's a pretty clever name. And I will have a link to that podcast in the description. I'm telling you, he's doing a fantastic job. It's good to see our APWU counterparts finally get a podcast that's similar to the ones that we've been doing. Third, I want to provoke a moment of silence because there is an APWU individual who has lost their life a few days ago. So we will have that moment of silence now. Thank you very much. This individual was climbing into a machine to fix it, and for whatever reason, it had turned on when it should have been locked out. The individual had lost their lives and was gone for 6 to 8 hours before they found him. This was 5 hours after their shift had ended. This should outrage anybody. This shows the absolute savages that management are. They are completely lacking of sound judgment. We are nothing but numbers to them. Within the same breath of announcing it, management went on record to tell us that the machine was still operational. This is everything that is wrong with them. A man dies at work, and the concern is not for the people who work beside him, not for his family, but for keeping the production uninterrupted. And this attitude isn't new. We saw it with Eugene Gates, found dead in a customer's driveway, and David Toutman, found trapped in his vehicle 4 hours after an accident on his route. There's a fine line between oversight and harassment, but ignoring basic human safety isn't either. The constant failure to check on employees to make sure they are safe and still alive must end. Most of us have devices on us that show that we've been stationary for hours on end. Why haven't they checked on those individuals? They check on them when it's time to discipline them, but to check on them when it's time to figure out if they're safe or not, that's a little bit too much for them. As long as fully operational is a response to a death, it is clear that people become secondary to the machines that they serve. And this is something no statement of sympathy can cover up. We're watching you, Postal Service, and we understand who you are. Alright, so as you might already gather, today's episode will be about how to write a great statement and how to gather information through interviews. I will start with what is a witness statement. We're going to start with the statement section. Statement is a written statement of evidence a person is able to give in relation to a particular matter and no irrelevant information. They must be neatly handwritten, either blue or black ink or preferably typed, only on one side. Full name, address, and occupation of person making a statement should be included. One fact per paragraph makes them understandable and makes the flow sound great. Signed and dated. That is important. It must be signed and dated. If it's not signed and dated, it's worthless in terms of evidence. Only what was seen, heard, or done. Written in a professional tone with no rumors or assumptions. Only facts. Now, I've got some tips for stewards, and we're going to expand on each tip. 1. Prepare the witness. 2. Have them write their statement. 3. Read the statement. And 4. Have witness rewrite if necessary. Now, let's go through 1. Prepare the witness. Go through the following relevant information to keep it fresh on their mind and to tell them that this is the type of information that we would like to see in your statement. Now, don't write the statement for the grievant because that is absolutely not okay and it will not be subject to being counted as evidence, but at least guide them in what information is what we would like to include. A. When, on what date, and at what time of the day or night did the incident take place? Was there a witness at the time? Who was the witness at the time of the incident? What did the witness see? What did each person present say or do? What happened as a result of the incident? Was any damage caused or harm suffered? And this is in addition to that person witnessing it themselves. We want to know who the other witnesses were as well. If so, who or what caused the damage or harm? Include as much identifying information as possible. What was the state of health of the victim or the victim's property prior to the incident? What did the witness and the other persons present do immediately after the incident? If the victim was taken away, describe what happened. And were there any other witnesses to the events that have not been previously identified? That's what I'm referring to. Number 2, write the statement. While writing a statement, make sure it is clear and concise, short and sweet. Want to read well. Don't forget, an 8th grade level is probably the most wanted level of reading comprehension that you should be doing for this because you don't know who's going to be reading it above the chain. Relevant detail included, nothing irrelevant, please. Nothing that's irrelevant to the subject. Especially don't use the statement to attack a supervisor or another carrier in a way that's irrelevant to the issue. That makes the person sound like they're not very professional and that they might not be a reliable witness. No gaps. No inconsistencies. Make sure you're writing only facts, no opinions, with the exception on being for mutual respect or JSOV because that's entirely opinion-based. For JSOV, you want them to be as relevant to how that made them feel and what their opinion on the matter was. But when it comes to most other statements, facts, not opinions. Do not include hearsay. Use your own words. Identify acronyms and identify people because just remember that these statements might be going to an arbitrator. And an arbitrator probably didn't work for the Postal Service before. So they might not know what a T6 means. And things like T6s might actually have different acronyms in different places. People as well, like they might not know the difference between a supervisor or a postmaster or a manager. So make sure to correctly identify and explain things as if you were sending them to somebody who had no idea what this job was about. They might not know what a pumpkin is or other identifying things that are commonly used in the Postal Service. Don't use those words unless you explain what they mean. And attach corroborating or supportive evidence every time you can. Number 3, read the statement. Always read your witness statement before ever sharing information. Check off items and question whether or not you went over with witness prior to them writing it. And, of course, don't tell the witness to write very specific things. You want them to put it in their own words. This is not going to be about inserting your argument into the witness's statement. That will make the statement essentially lacking integrity, and it will reflect on you as lacking integrity. So make sure that you don't tell the grievant what to write, but you could still guide them in the right direction as to what information you would like to see. And then if something is incorrect, rewrite it if necessary. You want these things to be clear, concise, and legible. If it needs to be rewritten, ask the grievant to rewrite it. We have every right to ask that. Now, just remember, there may be penalties for making false witness statements. For example, in the law, if making a false witness statement causes the police to be diverted from an investigation, this may constitute hindering an investigation, which itself is a criminal offense in some jurisdictions. Now, there are penalties in the Postal Service. So I'm going to end the statement portion on what penalties exist in the Postal Service that apply to statements and writing false ones. Okay, so we're going to start with ELM 661.2, Application to Postal Employees. In addition to the statutes listed in Title V Code of Federal Regulations, Part 2635.901 through 902, the following statutes and regulations are applicable to all employees in the Postal Service. ELM, Prohibition against fraud or false statements in a government matter, 18 U.S.C. 1001. Except as otherwise provided in this section, whoever in any matter within the jurisdiction of the executive, legislative, or judicial branch of the government of the United States knowingly and willingly falsifies, conceals, or cover up any trick, scheme, or device of material fact, makes any materially false, fictitious, or fraudulent statement or representation, or makes or uses any false writing or document, knowing the same to contain any materially false, fictitious, or fraudulent statement or entry, shall be fined under this title, imprisoned not more than 5 years, or, if the offense involves international domestic terrorism, as defined in Section 2331, imprisoned not more than 8 years, or both. If the matter relates to an offense under Chapter 109A, 109B, 110, or 117, or Section 1591, then the term of imprisonment imposed under this section shall not be more than 8 years. So there are penalties to writing false statements. So make sure that you guys are keeping the integrity in the investigation, and just keep it real, because management always fucks up. You don't have to lie to catch them in the act, and there's no reason to lie on a manager. They're already lying machines. So it should be simple. Keep your integrity on your side of the investigation, and you guys will win. All right, so we're going to move on to investigative interviews. I just want to tell you, investigative interviews are overlooked by a long shot. Stewards, you should be investigating management every chance you get, because there are many times where you can investigate management and put on record what exactly happened, and you'll see that record changes, and it will put into question the integrity of the witness. And there's many different ways that you could use this. Use it for almost any case. You need to gather information from management, because especially discipline cases, because oftentimes they lie or say the wrong thing. So, investigative interviews. A good investigative interview is only as good as the person conducting it. As with all skills, knowledge, preparation, and practice makes perfect. Some interviews are with friendly witnesses, and some are hostile. Structure your interview for each to get all the information. Sometimes you'll get management who will clam up and they'll just say, they'll just like I had one guy who I asked him how the discipline was relevant to the just cause principles, and he would just keep saying, needs of the business, even if it wasn't relevant to what was going on. But there's actually a place for that, and it shows the integrity of your witness. But interviews are important to determine the facts and whether or not you have a grievance. Management answering all questions with "I don't know" is not necessarily a bad thing when your grievant does remember what happened. Answers that are changed later shows the credibility of the witness. Request the individuals and time needed. This is during the preparation of your investigative interview. To the extent possible, pick a non-threatening place for the interview, such as a conference room or private office. To the extent possible, give the interviewee a choice of times for the interview, being respectful of his or her workload. Provide the subject with a rough estimate of the amount of time the interview will take. Remove distractions in an interview room. Provide the interviewee with a comfortable chair that doesn't face a window. Create a comprehensive list of investigative interview questions that you can choose from depending on the direction the interview takes. Put the subject at ease before starting the interview. And just to let you know, you could do an interview with a laptop. You don't have to do it by writing, and that will make choosing different questions a little bit easier. Also, you have the right to interview anybody in the Postal Service, or even outside of the Postal Service, but if it's outside the Postal Service, they don't have to make them available. They have to allow you to go do it, like, for example, interviewing a customer or patron. But when it comes to Postal Service individuals, they have to make them available, and you have the right to interview everybody, including even someone like the district manager. Begin by establishing a baseline by asking simple, easy-to-answer questions that the subject is likely to answer truthfully, such as, I start with, state your name and position for the record, please. And then I go into, how long have you worked for the Postal Service? Which post office do you work at? What's your position? How long have you held that position? Ask open-ended questions to get the subject to talk, such as, tell me about, when did you see, what did you hear, and what happened next are all good examples. Avoid loaded questions, such as, are you a tough supervisor? Avoid questions at the beginning that can be answered with yes or no. Save those for the end. Do not ask accusatory questions. Ask simple questions that address one fact at a time rather than combining more than one idea into the same question. Do not ask leading questions that indicate the answer you are looking for, such as, isn't it true that you are yelling at the steward on the workroom floor? That's something that a lot of stewards don't really listen to. You need to stop asking leading questions because that's not considered a good way to ask questions. And we got to attack management when they ask leading questions on their discipline. Ask yes or no questions at the end of the interview to pin down specific facts that were revealed during the interview. Just remember, you got to go into this with objectivity, something that management has a hard time doing. You may understand that you have a goal in mind, but you got to come into this objectively. You got to come into this. You need to wrap all your questions around not knowing the answer yet so that they can be truly not leading. Explain that you are taking every allegation seriously and are committed to finding the truth. Avoid being too familiar or taking on the role of one of the guys. Do not share information about what other interview subjects have said unless you're trying to obtain information from a hostile witness. Avoid expressing your thoughts, opinions, or conclusions about the case or what the interviewee says. Do not make deals with the subject, and practice self-awareness by identifying your own potential biases and putting them aside while conducting the interview. Now, in developing the interview, if the interview is about a specific event, identify the 5 W's. Who, what, when, where, why. It's like we're back in school again. You always went over this in school. Exactly what occurred, when did it happen, where did it happen, who was present, and who else may know relevant information. Ask the witness to list all individuals who have knowledge of any of the events. That way, you can go and interview those witnesses as well. So, how did it happen? Who did or said what? In what order? Why did it happen? Could it have been avoided? Are there notes, documents, phone messages, or other evidence? Proceed in chronological order to ensure nothing is missed. Ask about witnesses or others who can corroborate or comment on the incident. You may have to make an additional information request to interview additional witnesses. Of course you do. Ask the subject to recreate the dialogue of the incident in what order of what was said. Oftentimes you'll see that different witnesses will have different orders, and that will speak to the subject of, is this something that actually truly occurred? Identify the source of the subject's knowledge, hearsay, rumor, eyewitnesses, or other direct knowledge. Take detailed notes that list only what is revealed in the interview without opinions or comments. Review and finalize notes immediately upon completion of the interview. Make sure they are legible and accurate. Repeat any questionable or confusing information back to the subject to ensure you heard it correctly. Get the witness to confirm any areas where you may have misheard or misinterpreted information. Ask for clarification and more detail on any vague points. Ask follow-up questions to establish more facts in the chain of events. If the subject gave evasive answers or avoided a question, rephrase the question and ask it again. If a manager answers they do not know without checking some resource like clock rings, schedules, or their notes, don't just move on to the next question. Stop and let them check the answer to the question. Request a copy of the document after the interview. Ask the subject whether there is anything they would like to add before you conclude the interview. That's important. It's always showing that you are objective. Use silence sometimes as a tool to prompt a reaction when possible. Remember, these interviews could be as long as you need them to be. It can be useful if a signed statement can be useful if witnesses may not be available in the future. It can also be used to contradict witnesses who become hostile or change the story later. Now, that'll do it for investigative interviews and statements. These are just the basics. I might go more in depth if you guys would prefer later on down the line, but for the time being, I just wanted to cover the basics. I also want to ask anybody who is part of an office who has an issue with staffing. Specifically, I'm looking for small offices who have an issue with staffing, especially in Region 6. Small offices, issue with staffing because they're not giving you enough CCAs and they're being forced every day. I'm talking about offices of like 5 people who are being forced all the way up to 12 on a regular basis, all because the district does not want to staff them. If that fits your description, please reach out to me, because I'm thinking of doing an episode about this, and I'd really like your input on the matter. Now, hopefully, you learned something valuable today, and as always, have a good day.
Shout out to the Roseville Wrecking Ball. He is an Article 8 scholar, and thank God, we need Article 8 scholars right now. The grievance genius and the Roseville Wrecking Ball doing amazing work.
Brothers and sisters, this guy is good, man. He's fucking good.
And my boy Joshua, he killed it. Man, he's lockstep right now. He's killing it.
You would think this guy has been around for 30 fucking years. That's how good he is. Yeah, it's like he won the contract.